Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a little bit of a different video for you. No stream or gameplay video today. We're breaking down the top cards of every color in the Crimson Vow meta as of January 2022. So if you like the video, please click the thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. First on the list, we have Fading Hope at 1 blue for an instant. This is a strictly better unsummon. Returns a target creature to its owner's hand if the mana value was 3 or less, scry 1. And that might be a little bit of an add-on, or it seems like it's just tacked on there, but it actually really does make a big difference when you're playing a control deck. Whether it be Azorius control or the much hated Izzet Epiphany, if you're on the play, you drop an island, and an aggro deck drops their 1-drop and starts rolling, you can either bounce their thing immediately, scry, look at the top card of your library, make sure that you're hitting your land drops, and sort of organize your play. It's a very, very good card. It is an uncommon, so it's easily craftable. A lot of people have it, and it's very good for control decks to maintain and manage the board and stall for time. Next up, we have Divide by Zero. Divide by Zero is used, again, like Fading Hope, to stall out the board, but it also will generate card advantage for you when you're playing control in the form of Learn. So it can target either a permanent of any kind, meaning Planeswalker, Artifact, Enchantment, Creature, whatever, with mana value 1 or greater, so it cannot target tokens. That's the only caveat. Or it can target spells. And as we all know, everything that's cast that is yet to resolve is a spell. So it can return spells as they're being cast to the opponent's hand. Now this actually helps a lot whenever control decks have Lear, Disciple of the Drowned out, so they can flash back everything from their graveyard, but spells can't be countered. This gets around that. If you cast Lear, your opponent casts a spell that you want to counter, you can still divide by 0 because you're not technically countering that spell. You're returning it to the opponent's hand. And at 3 mana to bounce something, say a 3, 4, or 5 drop, if you're bouncing one of your opponent's big finishers in aggro, and you can learn and grab a lesson spell that's tailor-made for exactly what you need, that's a very, very efficient spell. A lot of times you'll divide by 0 something and you'll grab Mascot Exhibition if you're playing a control deck and you're at 7 or 8 mana, and that can be your closer. So let's say that you have Epiphany but you don't have it in hand, but you have a Galvanic Iteration. Not a problem. Grab a Mascot Exhibition and double that, and you've got 6 tokens ready to attack. So third on our list is Infernal Grasp. Very efficient removal spell, creature removal, at instant speed, 1 black, 1 colorless mana. It states to destroy target creature and you lose 2 life. This is a typical black colored card fashion. You have a little bit of a downside to it, but it's easily payable to make this card as efficient as possible. So this has no qualifier on it, has no prerequisite. It's whatever creature you want to destroy, whether it's a 7-drop, a 2-drop, whatever. So the wide nature of this card and the efficiency of it leads it to be played in a lot of decks. And it's prevalent because you need instant speed removal in this meta. So even if you have something that deals, say, 5 damage at 2 cost or destroy target creature, it needs to be instant speed. Why? Because man lands, creature lands are present heavily in this meta. We have Faceless Haven, and we have each of the lands from the Dungeons and Dragons Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set. Each color runs them. Namely, you'll run into the green one, Lair of the Hydra, and you'll run into the white one, and sometimes the Eye of the Beholder, the black one. The blue one you will see too, actually, in control decks. So, very efficient removal. If you're in black, you're probably running this. It's a very, very good card. Next up, we have Elite Spellbinder. 3/1 flyer for 1 plains and 2 mana of any color. And when it comes into the battlefield, you can look at target opponent's hand and exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, they can play it, but they have to pay 2 more mana of any type to play it. Now, it's true that this card does not get rid of a card from their hand. It doesn't make them discard it or exile it completely. They can play it later, but just the ability to exile anything of your choosing that's a non-land from their hand makes this tailor-made to disrupt control decks when you're playing aggro. So early on, if you discover that they have only 2 mana and they have a spell which goes and fetches a land, you can exile that, making it impossible for them to play their bigger things. If you draw this later and they have, let's say, 3 cards in their hand, you can take their finisher from them, get that last little bit of damage in there to finish the game. It's a very efficient card. It's quite an aggressive card, and if left unchecked, it can close the game out for aggro. Next on the list, we have Luminar Aspirant. This card's been around for a while, since Zendikar Rising, and it's been a staple of the format since it was released. It's 1 plains, 1 generic mana. It's a 1/1. Beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that you control. It's a hyper-efficient way to boost your creatures in an aggro deck. For turn 2, it can also place the counter on itself, and if it's not dealt with, it grows out of control very, very quickly. So it's a perfect turn 2 play, because it tends to make the deck snowball and your damage come out of control if people can't deal with it. So if you're playing an aggressive 1-drop, an aggressive 2-drop, and then you have an aggressive 3-drop, and they have 1 removal spell in their hand, it's going to be very hard for them to figure out which card that they want to remove. If it's not this one, the counters can get out of control. Very cheap, very efficient card for aggro. Next up, we have Goldspan Dragon. Been around since Kaldheim. It costs 2 red mana and 3 of any type for a 4/4 flying haste. When it attacks or becomes a target of a spell, you create a treasure token. It also makes all treasure tokens that you own, not ones created by Goldspan Dragon alone, so that you can sacrifice them and add 2 mana of any color, which is double what you get with normal treasure tokens. This card's very strong because it comes down, it has an immediate effect on the board. For 5 mana, you get 4 damage in. If they don't have a flyer, they have to deal with this card. Otherwise, the treasure tokens just get out of control. Next on the list, we have Lear, Disciple of the Drowned. She is a 3/4 legendary creature, a human wizard, for 2 blue and 3 generic mana. Spells cannot be countered while Lear is out, and each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to that card's mana cost. What makes this card so powerful is that your opponent can Fading Hope, they can bounce things, they can remove things. Keep you at bay if you're playing an aggro deck against them. Cast Lear on turn 5, and then if they get to untap with Lear, they get to essentially cast all of their instant and sorcery spells that aren't counters against you again, giving them double value for all of those cards. It's an incredibly powerful card. That's why it's a mythic rare and it's legendary. If it comes down, the best way to deal with it is remove it instantly if you have instant speed removal, such as Infernal Grasp, in your hand on turn 5. Otherwise, the value brought by this card is just going to overwhelm you unless you can get that last little bit of damage in. Next on our list, we have Meathook Massacre. At 2 black and X, when Meathook Massacre enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. When a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. And when a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain a life. So this is a very, very powerful card. We haven't seen anything like this in Standard recently because this is an enchantment that has an effect while it remains on the battlefield after the board wipe. That's what makes it so powerful. Also that the creatures get -X/-X, it gets around indestructibility, which is an added bonus, and it's a tunable board wipe. So you'll see a lot of cards like Cinder Class deals 1 damage, 2 if you kick it to every creature, Other cards destroy all creatures no matter what. This is each creature -X/-X. So let's say you have a 4/4 or 5/5 on the field. An opponent has a lot of 2/2s, 3/3s. You can tune this card so your creature is left alive. This is a common finisher in mono black builds, where they'll put a bunch of trash creatures on the field, attack you with it, get you down to 4 or 5 life, and then they'll Meathook the entire board and kill 4 or 5 of their own creatures and drain you for the rest. Very powerful card at Mythic Rare, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Next on our list is the infamous and hated and loved Alrund's Epiphany. This card has seen some play when Kaldheim released as finishers or a way to buy some time in longer ramp decks or control decks. It's 5 colorless and 2 blue. You can foretell it, or 2 colorless on turn 2 or 3. You can pay the foretell cost for 6. And it gives you an extra turn after your current turn and creates 2 1/1 blue bird creature tokens with flying. The bird portion is important. This can be a couple chump blockers if you're behind. And in the Izzet Epiphany decks that debuted basically at this year's Worlds Championship, the meta was littered with Izzet Epiphany decks. I believe they came in second place and third and fourth and so on. This card is very, very powerful, but what really puts it over the top is the new card Galvanic Iteration, which you can double this. Take 2 turns, create 4 bird tokens, or if you have multiple iterations in your hand, you can even double it, triple it, quadruple it. Very powerful finisher for Izzet colored Epiphany decks, as well as some Dimir and Azorius control decks. Next up on our list, Holebreaker Horror. It is 5 generic and 2 blue mana for a total cost of 7. Is a Kraken Horror. Big stats at 7/8 with Flash. That alone would actually be quite impressive, but it also cannot be countered, and whenever you cast a spell, you can choose up to 1. Either return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner. Control decks will use this as a finisher. It'll come down, flash at the end of your turn. They'll get to untap with it, hold spells in hand, and basically every instant or sorcery spell that they have, they can play. Returns either something that you have on the field, or if you cast a spell, they can cast any instant in response, and it acts sort of like a divide by 0 plus whatever spell they cast effect. It is an incredibly devastating finisher, and if you see it come down, treat it as you would with Leer. Try to get rid of it immediately with instant speed removal, because you can't counter it and the value is going to overwhelm. Next up, we have our first green card, Ranger Class. 1 green, 1 generic mana. It is a Saga. Turn 1, it comes down, creates you a nice 2/2 wolf token. If you tap 2, whenever you attack, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. And for 4, you can look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. Generally, this is most powerful on turn 2 or turn 3. So that way you can get your wolf on turn 3 or 4. You can tap 2 mana to make that wolf bigger, or you can buff another creature. So choose whichever attacking creature you want, you can put the counter on. If the game stalls out, you can tap 4 to be able to refill your board after a board wipe. This is a very, very good card. It's very efficient on turn 2, and it gets you a threat out there immediately, and then has other potential benefits as you level it up. For my money, this is the best of the D&D class enchantments, followed by Paladin class. Next, we have Esika's Chariot. It is a legendary artifact vehicle. 1 green mana, 3 generic for a 4/4 vehicle with a crew of 4. When it comes down onto the battlefield, it creates 2 2/2 green cat creature tokens. And whenever Esika's Chariot attacks, create a token that's a copy of target token that you control. So this by itself, on turn 4, comes down, makes you 2 2/2 cats. Next turn, you can use those cats to crew it, and you You can copy one of those cats, leaving you with 3 2/2 cats. But it's important to notice that this card also creates copies of any token that you control, whether or not that's one of the cats that it created. It can also copy one of the Wrenn and 7 Tree Folk tokens if you have the Wrenn and 7 Planeswalker down. This thing can also, if you really need it, can copy treasure tokens or blood tokens. Very versatile effect, and it's one of the top played cards in the meta for a reason. Mono green would be sort of lost without this card. It's an auto include in mono green decks. Next up, we have Cinder Class, an instant at 1 red, 1 generic mana with a kicker of 1 red mana. Cinder Class deals 1 damage to each creature. If it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to each creature instead. This is a very versatile card, and it's very good in a multitude of decks. The only deck that you're not going to be playing this in is a pure aggro deck, but it's good if you're playing Izzet Epiphany against aggro. You can take out their 1-drop, their 2-drop, sometimes their 3-drop if it's something like a Brutal Cathar or Skyclave Apparition with only toughness. This is also good to save in your hand with a couple of mana untapped against other Izzet Epiphany decks if you're playing Izzet Epiphany. When they make 4 to 6 bird tokens, you can wipe them all out, negating their lethal damage. Very good, very efficient card. Those are some of the best cards for January 2022 Crimson Vow meta. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate if you give it a thumbs up and subscribe and share with your friends who like Magic Arena. And you can check around the channel to see streams, gameplay videos, and more. Thank you.